I'm Courtney, 34 years old, and I never thought a birthday dinner could change everything. My sister Lauren always had a way of making me feel small, but what happened at her 40th birthday celebration went beyond anything I could have imagined. Being seated at the kids' table was just the beginning of a night that would ultimately transform our relationship forever. Before I get into this story about family, betrayal, and finally standing up for myself, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, and hit subscribe if you enjoy real-life stories. Growing up, Lauren and I were actually pretty close. Only 3 years apart, we spent our childhood building forts in the backyard, riding bikes around the neighborhood, and watching Saturday morning cartoons together. She always took her role as my big sister seriously, teaching me to tie my shoes and standing up for me when neighborhood kids picked on me. Those were simpler times, before success, money, and adult relationships created a divide between us. Things started changing when Lauren hit high school. She blossomed socially, becoming popular, and focused on her academics. Meanwhile, I discovered photography in my freshman year when a teacher noticed I had an eye for composition. While Lauren was getting straight A's and being elected class president, I was spending hours in the darkroom, developing my craft. This difference in our paths created the first real gap between us. Our parents noticed too. Dad, an accountant, and Mom, a former teacher, had definite ideas about success. Lauren's path aligned perfectly with their vision straight as business school and eventually a corporate career. My artistic pursuits were treated as a phase that I would eventually outgrow. "When are you going to get a real job?" became their constant refrain during my college years at art school. By the time Lauren graduated with her MBA and landed an executive position at a marketing firm, the family dynamic was set. Family gatherings became showcases for Lauren's accomplishments, while my freelance photography work was barely acknowledged. "Courtney's still doing his little picture thing," my mom would say when relatives asked about me, even after I'd shot campaigns for regional businesses. Then came Maxwell. Lauren met him at a corporate retreat 5 years ago. From old money, with a law degree from Harvard and a position at his family's firm, Maxwell perfectly complemented Lauren's vision of success. From our first meeting, I could tell he looked down on me. He asked about my hobby and seemed genuinely surprised when I explained that photography was my career. "But how do you make ends meet?" he'd asked, swirling expensive scotch in his glass. "Surely you can't support yourself taking pictures." The conversation only went downhill from there, with Maxwell suggesting various corporate jobs that might suit someone like me. Lauren sat beside him, nodding along, not once defending my choices. After they married, the dynamic worsened. Invitations to their home became rare, and when I did visit, Maxwell made little effort to hide his disdain. Their house, a sprawling 5-bedroom in the wealthiest part of town, seemed designed to emphasize the gap between our lifestyles. My 1-bedroom apartment above a coffee shop downtown, which I actually loved for its character and natural light, became something Lauren would reference with a mix of pity and embarrassment. Despite all this, I kept trying to maintain our relationship. I showed up to every family event, bought thoughtful gifts for holidays, and regularly texted Lauren about getting together. Sometimes, in rare moments when Maxwell wasn't around, I'd catch glimpses of my old sister laughing at an inside joke or reminiscing about childhood memories. In recent months, things had actually been looking up for me professionally. I landed a contract with a national travel magazine to shoot a series across the Pacific Northwest. It was my biggest break yet, offering both exposure and financial stability. I was excited to share this news with Lauren, hoping it might finally earn some respect from her and Maxwell. For her 40th birthday gift, I went all out. Lauren had once mentioned a vintage Tiffany bracelet she'd seen in a magazine. After weeks of searching, I found one from the 1,960 seconds that matched her description. It cost nearly 2 months' rent, but I wanted to give her something special, something that showed I valued our relationship despite everything. Looking back, I can see how I'd fallen into a pattern of accepting mistreatment to keep peace in the family. I'd laugh off Maxwell's condescending comments, pretend not to notice when Lauren dismissed my career, and keep showing up hoping things would change. My girlfriend Natalie had been pointing this out for months, gently suggesting that I needed to establish boundaries. "You deserve respect," she'd say. "Being family doesn't give them the right to treat you like you're less than them." Deep down, I knew she was right, but the thought of confrontation made my stomach twist. What if standing up for myself meant losing my sister completely? The invitation to Lauren's birthday dinner arrived via text just 3 days before the event. "Having a small gathering for my birthday at LeBlanc on Friday. Can you make it? 7 p.m. Dress nice." The last-minute notice felt like an afterthought, as if I'd barely made the guest list. Still, I responded immediately that I'd be there, already planning to give her the bracelet I'd been saving. When Lauren texted the invitation, I immediately sensed something off about it. The restaurant she chose, LeBlanc, was the most expensive in town, a place where entrees started at $50 and reservations typically needed to be made weeks in advance. The fact that she specified dress nice suggested this wasn't just a casual family dinner. I texted back, asking who else would be there. Her response came hours later. "Just some friends, colleagues, and family. Nothing too big." Something about the vagueness made me uneasy, but I pushed the feeling aside. This was a chance to reconnect, to share my good news about the magazine contract, and to give her the gift I'd been so excited about. The day before the dinner, I went shopping for a new shirt. My wardrobe consisted mostly of comfortable clothes, suitable for photo shoots, not fine dining. I settled on a navy button-down that the sales associate assured me looked sophisticated but not trying too hard. I even splurged on a haircut, wanting to look my best. That evening, Natalie came over to help me wrap Lauren's gift. As I told her about the dinner plans, she gave me that look I'd come to recognize, concerned but trying not to overstep. "What's that face for?" I asked, struggling with the ribbon. She sat beside me on the couch. "I just want you to be prepared. Based on what you've told me about these events, you always end up feeling bad afterward." "This time might be different," I said, though I didn't entirely believe it. "It's her 40th. Maybe she's in a reflective mood, you know, valuing family and all that." Natalie took the ribbon from my fumbling hands and tied it perfectly. "I hope so. But just remember what we talked about. You don't have to stay in situations that make you feel worthless." I nodded, appreciating her concern but also feeling that familiar resistance to confrontation. "I'll try. But it's complicated with family." "I know," she said softly. "Just know your worth, okay?" The morning of the dinner, I felt unexpectedly hopeful. I texted Lauren asking if she wanted to meet for coffee beforehand, thinking a more casual setting might ease us into conversation. She replied quickly, "Too busy with preparations. See you tonight." Another missed opportunity, but I tried to stay positive. I spent the afternoon rehearsing what I'd say about my new photography contract, trying to frame it in terms that Lauren and Maxwell might respect. National exposure, significant compensation, industry recognition, terms that translated my artistic success into their corporate value system. By 6:30, I was dressed and ready, the carefully wrapped gift box on the passenger seat beside me. The drive to LeBlanc took 20 minutes, each mile ramping up my anxiety. I remembered previous gatherings, Lauren's law school graduation, where my parents introduced me as our other child. He's exploring his options. Thanksgiving dinner, where Maxwell had extensively questioned my retirement plan, or lack thereof. Christmas, where my gift to Lauren, a framed photograph I'd taken of her childhood home, was set aside with barely a glance, while Maxwell's diamond earrings were met with tears of joy. Parking in the restaurant's lot, I gave myself a final pep talk. Just be yourself. Your work has value. Your life has value. Don't let them make you feel small. LeBlanc was even more intimidating than I remembered. Crystal chandeliers, white tablecloths, waitstaff in formal attire. I approached the maitre d' with Lauren's gift tucked under my arm. "I'm here for the Crawford party," I said, using Lauren's married name. The maitre d' consulted his list. "Ah, yes, they've already been seated. Follow me." Walking through the restaurant, I spotted Lauren immediately. She was at the center of the largest table, wearing a black cocktail dress, her hair styled elegantly. She looked up as I approached and waved, her smile seeming genuine. For a moment, my hopes lifted. "Courtney, you made it." She stood to air kiss my cheek. "Happy birthday," I said, returning her smile. "You look amazing." She beamed, then turned to the table. "Everyone, this is my little brother. Not this is Courtney. He's an accomplished photographer," or even just, "This is Courtney." The diminutive introduction immediately set the tone. Still, I smiled and nodded at the table of strangers, recognizing a few faces from previous events. Lauren's closest friends from college, some colleagues I'd met at her wedding, our parents seated near her. Maxwell rose from his seat beside Lauren, extending his hand with that smile that never reached his eyes. "The artist arrives," he announced, as if my profession was a punchline. "Glad you could find time in your schedule." I shook his hand firmly, determined not to let him get under my skin. Wouldn't miss it. I turned to Lauren. "I have something for you," I said, holding out the gift. "Oh, how sweet. Put it with the others for now," she said, gesturing to a small table in the corner piled with wrapped packages. "We'll open everything after dinner." As I placed my gift on the table, I noticed the elaborate place settings around the main tables. Multiple forks, crystal glasses, embossed name cards. I scanned the arrangements, looking for my name. "We've had some last-minute additions," Lauren explained, appearing beside me. "The seating got a bit complicated." "No problem," I said. "Just point me where to go." That's when Maxwell approached, that smirk already forming on his face. "We've got a special spot for you," he said, placing his hand on my shoulder in a gesture that might have appeared friendly to onlookers but felt like a power move. "Follow me." I followed him past the main tables where all the adults were seated, a growing sense of unease building in my chest. We approached a smaller table tucked in the corner of the room where 4 children none older than 10 were seated, coloring on their placemats with crayons provided by the restaurant. Maxwell gestured to an empty chair. "Here we are." I looked at him, waiting for the punchline. When none came, I asked, "You're kidding, right?" His smirk widened. "Only important guests sit with the adults." We needed the space for Lauren's boss and some clients. I felt heat rising to my face as several nearby guests turned to watch this interaction. "This is a joke," I said, my voice low. "Not at all," Maxwell replied smoothly. "Someone needs to watch the kids anyway. 2 birds, 1 stone." I looked back at the main table where Lauren was engaged in animated conversation, seemingly oblivious to what was happening. Beyond humiliated, I approached the kids' table to find there wasn't even a place setting for me. No plate, no silverware, nothing. LeBlanc was known for its opulence. Crystal chandeliers hung from coffered ceilings, each table draped in pristine white linen and set with fine china. The adult tables were decorated with elegant centerpieces of white roses and silver candelabras. In stark contrast, the kids' table had paper placemats with a connect the dots game and cups with plastic lids. 4 children sat at this table. Twin boys about 8 years old who I recognized as belonging to Lauren's colleague Patricia, a little girl around 5 who was the daughter of Lauren's college roommate, and a boy about 10 who I later learned was the son of Maxwell's business partner. They all looked up at me with confused expressions as I stood there, Maxwell's words still ringing in my ears. "Are you going to be sitting with us?" asked one of the twins, looking equally confused by the situation. I stood there frozen, unable to process what was happening. The kids' table was literally a different piece of furniture, smaller, less elegant, clearly designed for children. Each child had a plastic cup with a lid, a simplified place setting, and a menu with chicken fingers and mini pizzas. Looking more closely, I realized there wasn't even a place for me, no chair, no setting, nothing. It was as if I'd been directed to supervise the children rather than join the dinner as a guest. I looked back at the main tables where conversations flowed, wine was being poured, and servers were delivering appetizers. Lauren caught my eye briefly, then quickly looked away, continuing her conversation with the elegantly dressed woman beside her, my face burning with embarrassment. I walked back toward the main table where Lauren sat. Several guests glanced at me, then quickly looked away, creating that unmistakable atmosphere of secondhand embarrassment. I approached Lauren, determined to handle this with dignity despite my racing heart. "Lauren," I said quietly when I reached her, "there seems to be a mistake with the seating." She looked up, her expression a mixture of annoyance and discomfort at being interrupted. "What's the problem?" she asked, though her tone suggested she knew exactly what the problem was. "There's no place for me at the table. Maxwell directed me to sit with the children, but there isn't even a setting there." Lauren glanced around at her guests, clearly embarrassed by the disruption. She lowered her voice. "We had limited space, Courtney. Some of my important clients showed up unexpectedly. So you put your brother at the kids' table? Without even a plate?" I kept my voice level, though it took tremendous effort. She shrugged, the gesture so dismissive it felt like a physical blow. "Guess you're not that important." Then she actually turned away from me, raising her voice to continue her previous conversation, effectively dismissing me in front of everyone. In that moment, something crystallized in me. Years of small dismissals, of being treated as less than, of having my work and my life devalued it, all converged into perfect clarity. I stood there for a moment, feeling strangely calm, despite the humiliation burning through me. I walked deliberately back to the gift table, picked up the package containing the vintage Tiffany bracelet I'd spent weeks tracking down, and returned to where Lauren Saturday. Conversations around the table died down as people sensed the tension. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," I said, my voice steady and loud enough for those nearby to hear. "I came here tonight as your brother, bringing a gift I thought you'd treasure, hoping to celebrate your birthday and share some good news of my own. But it's clear that I'm not welcome as a guest." Lauren's face flushed. "Don't be so dramatic, Courtney. Just take a seat wherever." "No," I said, surprised by the firmness in my voice. "I won't sit at a kid's table without even the basic courtesy of a place setting. I won't be an afterthought at my own sister's birthday." I held the gift in my hands for a moment longer, then placed it on the table beside her. "I'm leaving. Happy birthday." The silence around the table was absolute. Lauren's expression froze, her mouth slightly open, clearly shocked that I was actually standing up for myself. Maxwell, who had been watching from nearby with that perpetual smirk, looked suddenly uncertain. "You can't just leave," Lauren said, her voice rising slightly. "What will people think?" I almost laughed at her concern about appearances even now. "I don't know what they'll think, Lauren. Maybe they'll think it's strange to invite your brother to your birthday dinner and seat him at the kids' table without even a plate." I looked around at the other guests, some of whom had the decency to look uncomfortable. "Enjoy your evening, everyone." With that, I turned and walked toward the exit, feeling dozens of eyes on my back. I didn't run or hurry. I walked with as much dignity as I could muster, even nodding politely to the maitre d' as I passed. Outside in the parking lot, the cool evening air hit my face, and I took my first full breath since discovering the seating arrangement. My hands were shaking as I reached for my car keys. Part of me expected Lauren to come running after me, to apologize, to ask me to come back inside. She didn't. As I sat in my car, the full weight of what had just happened began to sink in. I wasn't just hurt, I was angry. Angry at Lauren for her callous treatment, at Maxwell for his smug superiority, at myself for allowing this pattern to continue for so long. But beneath the anger was something else. Relief. For the first time in years, I had stood up for myself, had refused to accept being treated as less than I deserved. I started the car and pulled out of the parking lot, leaving behind not just the restaurant but years of accepting disrespect. As I drove home through the darkening streets, I realized that something fundamental had shifted. Whether or not Lauren and I ever repaired our relationship, I would never again allow myself to be made small for someone else's comfort. The drive home passed in a blur. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white, and my mind raced between moments of fierce pride and waves of devastating hurt. By the time I pulled into the parking spot outside my apartment building, my phone had already buzzed several times in my pocket. I ignored it. Inside my apartment, I loosened my tie and collapsed onto the couch, finally pulling out my phone to see the damage. 5 text messages from Lauren, 2 from my mother, and 1 from a number I didn't recognize but assumed was Maxwell. Lauren's messages escalated in tone. "Are you serious right now? You're being incredibly childish. Way to make my birthday about you. Everyone is uncomfortable because of your scene. Call me when you're ready to apologize." My mother's messages were predictably one-sided. "What's wrong with you? Call your sister immediately. We raised you better than this." Maxwell's message was just one line. Quite the dramatic exit. Very artistic. I threw the phone onto the cushion beside me and leaned back, closing my eyes. The audacity of them expecting me to apologize was almost laughable. Almost. My phone rang, and I saw Natalie's name on the screen. I answered immediately. "How did it go?" she asked. "About as well as a train wreck," I replied, then proceeded to tell her everything. As I described the kids' table, Maxwell's smirk, and Lauren's dismissive, "Guess you're not that important," Natalie gasped. "You've got to be kidding me," she said when I finished. "That's beyond disrespectful. That's deliberately cruel. The craziest part is, they think I'm the one who should apologize," I said. "For causing a scene." "Absolutely not." Natalie's voice was firm. "You did exactly the right thing by leaving. I'm proud of you for standing up for yourself." Her validation loosened something in my chest. It felt terrible and great at the same time. Terrible to realize how little they think of me, but great to finally stop accepting it. "That's because you're breaking a pattern," she said. "It's hard, but it's necessary." After we hung up, I sat in the quiet of my apartment, replaying not just tonight's events but years of similar treatment I'd normalized. The time Lauren had forgotten to tell family I'd won a regional photography award. The Christmas where everyone got thoughtful gifts except me, I received a generic gift card. Maxwell routinely introducing me as Lauren's brother, who takes pictures even after I'd shot campaigns for brands they used every day. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Lauren's frozen expression or felt the burning shame of standing beside that kid's table while other guests watched. By morning, I felt physically ill from the stress. My stomach knotted, a tension headache pounding behind my eyes. Around 9, my phone rang again. Lauren. I let it go to voicemail. Her message was a masterclass in minimization. "Hey, so last night got weird. I don't know why you overreacted like that. The seating was last minute, and I was trying to accommodate everyone. Call me back so we can move past this silly drama." No apology. No acknowledgement of how hurtful her actions had been. Just silly drama that needed to be moved past. I deleted the message without responding. Throughout the day, family members began taking sides. My cousin Taylor texted her support. "Heard what happened. That was seriously messed up. You okay?" An aunt I'd always been close with called to check on me, saying she'd heard from my mother but wanted my version of events. But others were less supportive. My father called, his voice gruff with disappointment. "Your sister is very upset. I don't know what's gotten into you, but you need to make this right." "Did she tell you what happened?" I asked. "Did she mention seating me at the kids' table without even a place setting?" There was a pause. "She said there was a misunderstanding about the seating. These things happen at events. No need to make a mountain out of a molehill." "It wasn't a misunderstanding, Dad. Maxwell literally told me only important guests sit with the adults." Then Lauren said, "I guess I wasn't that important." Another pause. Longer this time. "Well, I'm sure they didn't mean it like that." "How else could they have meant it?" I asked. Frustration building. "How would you feel if someone treated you that way?" "That's different," he said automatically. "Look, just call your sister. She's family. Being family doesn't give her the right to treat me like I don't matter," I said, surprising myself with my firmness. "I need to go, Dad. I have work to do." After hanging up, I sat at my desk staring at the editing work I needed to complete but couldn't focus on. The emotional toll was manifesting physically. My shoulders ached with tension, my head throbbed, and I felt utterly exhausted despite having done nothing but field uncomfortable calls all morning. I found myself wondering about the gift I'd left behind. Had Lauren opened it? Did she understand the effort I'd put into finding that specific vintage bracelet she'd once mentioned wanting? Did it matter to her at all? Or was it just another item to be cataloged in her collection of expensive things? The next few days passed in a similar haze. I threw myself into work, editing the Pacific Northwest photos with an intensity that left little room for rumination. Friends checked in, offering support, and often sharing their own stories of family disrespect. I was surprised by how common these experiences were. How many people had been made to feel small by the very people who should have valued them most. A week after the dinner, I made the decision to step back from communication with Lauren and Maxwell. No angry declarations or ultimatums. I simply stopped responding to their increasingly manipulative messages. Lauren's text had evolved from demands for apology, to guilt trips about family unity, to faux concern about my mental state. Classic tactics to regain control without addressing the actual harm done. Instead of engaging, I focused on relationships that felt healthy and supportive. I called my grandmother, who had always treated me with respect regardless of my career choice. I spent more time with Natalie and friends who celebrated my successes rather than diminishing them. I even joined a photography group that met monthly to share work and offer constructive feedback. For the first time, I began to question other relationships in my life that followed similar patterns. A client who constantly devalued my work while benefiting from it. A friend from college who only called when he needed something. With each realization came both pain and liberation. Pain at recognizing the pattern, liberation in choosing to change it. The bracelet remained a symbol in my mind, not just of the thoughtfulness Lauren had never appreciated, but of the relationship I had idealized, despite years of evidence to the contrary. I had spent so much energy trying to earn the respect of people who had no intention of giving it, all while overlooking those who had valued me all along. 3 weeks passed without contact from my side. During this time, something unexpected happened. I landed the biggest opportunity of my career. The editor of the travel magazine was so impressed with my Pacific Northwest series that she offered me a contract for an international assignment, 6 months, documenting remote villages in South America for a major feature. The pay would be more than I'd made in the previous year, and the exposure could transform my career. My first instinct was to call Lauren. Despite everything, she was still my sister, and some part of me still craved her approval. I picked up my phone, scrolled to her name, then set it down again. This moment was mine to celebrate with people who genuinely supported me. Instead, I called Natalie, then my grandmother, then my photography mentor from college. Their enthusiasm was genuine, their congratulations untainted by comparisons or qualifications. It felt clean somehow, like drinking spring water after years of something slightly contaminated. Meanwhile, Lauren's attempts to regain control of the situation had escalated. What started as texts became calls, then voicemails, with increasing urgency. "It's been a week. This is getting ridiculous." Then, "Mom and Dad are really worried about you." Finally, "If you don't call me back, I'm coming by your apartment." She made good on this threat on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the middle of planning my equipment needs for the South America trip when my buzzer rang. Through the intercom, Lauren's voice was sharp with irritation. "It's me. We need to talk." I considered not answering, but this confrontation was inevitable. Better to have it on my terms. I buzzed her up. When I opened the door, Lauren stood there in a tailored suit, clearly having come directly from work. Her expression was a familiar mix of annoyance and superiority. "Finally," she said, walking past me into the apartment without waiting to be invited. "Do you know how many times I've called you?" "I do," I replied calmly. I chose not to answer. She turned to face me, clearly taken aback by my directness. "What is going on with you? First that scene at my birthday, now this silent treatment. It's childish." I gestured to the living room. "Would you like to sit down?" She seemed surprised by my composure but followed me to the couch. I took the chair opposite, maintaining both physical and emotional distance. "I've been doing a lot of thinking these past few weeks," I began. "About our relationship, about the way I've been treated by you and Maxwell for years." "Here we go," she muttered, rolling her eyes. "That," I said, pointing at her dismissive gesture. "That right there is what I'm talking about. You asked what's going on with me. I've decided I deserve basic respect, especially from family. What happened at your birthday wasn't a misunderstanding or an overreaction on my part. It was just the last in a long line of incidents where you've made it clear how little you value me." Lauren's face flushed. "That's not fair. You're my brother. Of course I value you." "How? By seating me at the kids' table without even a plate? By introducing me as your little brother rather than by my name and profession? By letting Maxwell make condescending comments about my career without ever once defending me?" She shifted uncomfortably. The seating was complicated. We had last-minute guests. "Lauren, Maxwell literally told me, 'Only important guests sit with the adults.' And when I pointed out there wasn't even a place setting for me, you said, and I quote, 'Guess you're not that important.' How exactly should I have interpreted that?" For the first time, Lauren seemed at a loss for words. "He shouldn't have said that," she finally admitted, "and neither should I. But you didn't need to make a scene and ruin my birthday. I didn't make a scene. I removed myself from a situation where I was being disrespected. There's a difference. I leaned forward slightly. And I didn't ruin your birthday. You and Maxwell did that by treating me like I didn't matter. She was quiet for a moment, then shifted strategies. Mom and Dad are really upset about this rift between us. We're family, Courtney. We need to move past this. I agree that we're family. That's exactly why your behavior hurts so much. Being family should mean more respect, not less. I took a deep breath. I'm not interested in moving past this without addressing it. That's what I've done for years, and it's only gotten worse. Lauren stood up, pacing slightly. What do you want from me then? Some formal apology? Fine. I'm sorry you felt bad at my party. I almost laughed at the classic non-apology. That's not an apology, Lauren. That's you saying I'm too sensitive, which is exactly the problem. I don't feel bad because I'm oversensitive. I feel bad because I was treated badly. We continued this back and forth for nearly an hour. Lauren cycling through various tactics, minimization, guilt, anger, even brief moments of genuine reflection before retreating to defensiveness. I maintained my position calmly but firmly. By the time she left, we hadn't reached any real resolution, but something had shifted. For perhaps the first time in our adult relationship, I hadn't backed down or accepted less than I deserved. The following weekend, our parents invited us both to dinner. I suspected a setup but agreed to go with clear boundaries in mind. As expected, they attempted to mediate the situation, but their approach was revealing. They kept referring to the incident as a misunderstanding and suggesting that family harmony should take precedence over my feelings. I understand you're upset, Courtney, my mother said, but holding grudges isn't healthy. Lauren said she's sorry. Can't we move forward? I'm not holding a grudge, I replied. I'm establishing boundaries. There's a difference. My father looked confused. Boundaries with family? That seems extreme. Is it extreme to expect to be treated with basic respect? To not be seated at a kid's table without even a place setting? To not be told explicitly that I'm not important enough to sit with the adults? My parents exchanged glances. Slowly, I realized they hadn't heard the full story. Lauren had downplayed the incident significantly. Is that really what happened? My mother asked, looking at Lauren. Lauren shifted uncomfortably. It wasn't that dramatic. It was exactly that dramatic, I countered. And it's not an isolated incident. It's part of a pattern of how both you and Maxwell have treated me for years. The dinner ended with my parents clearly unsettled, caught between their instinct to preserve peace and the dawning realization that the situation was more serious than they'd understood. Lauren left abruptly after receiving a text from Maxwell, barely saying goodbye. In the parking lot, my mother pulled me aside. I didn't realize things were so bad between you two, she said quietly. Why didn't you ever say anything? Would you have listened? I asked, not unkindly. Or would you have told me to let it go because she's family? She didn't answer directly, which was answer enough. I just want my children to get along. I want that too, Mom. But getting along can't come at the expense of my self-respect. The following week brought an unexpected contact, Maxwell. He suggested meeting for coffee, ostensibly to clear the air. Curious about his motivations, I agreed. Maxwell was already seated when I arrived at the cafe, his expensive watch glinting as he checked the time. His smile seemed forced as I sat down. Courtney, thanks for coming. What can I do for you, Maxwell? I asked, skipping the pleasantries. He cleared his throat. Lauren is still quite upset about this whole birthday situation. It's affecting her work, her sleep. As her husband, I'm concerned. I can understand that, I said neutrally. Look, what happened at the restaurant was unfortunate. Perhaps my comment about important guests was poorly worded. I noted the careful phrasing unfortunate rather than wrong, poorly worded rather than unkind or disrespectful. A non-apology if I'd ever heard one. Is that why you wanted to meet? To tell me my sister is upset that there are consequences to her actions? Maxwell's polite facade slipped slightly. I'm trying to extend an olive branch here. Lauren values family. She wants to move past this. Moving past requires acknowledgement, Maxwell. Neither of you has actually acknowledged that what you did was wrong. He sighed impatiently. Fine. It was wrong to seat you at the kids' table. Is that what you need to hear? It's a start, I replied. But this isn't just about one incident. It's about years of dismissive treatment from both of you. The conversation deteriorated from there, with Maxwell eventually revealing his true purpose. Lauren's 40th birthday celebration continued to be a topic of gossip in their social circle, with several guests expressing discomfort about how I'd been treated. Image-conscious as always, they wanted to present a united family front at an upcoming charity gala. I left the meeting with clarity. Maxwell hadn't sought me out from genuine remorse but from concern about appearances. Nevertheless, it represented a shift in power. For the first time, they were coming to me, seeking reconciliation on my terms, rather than demanding I fall in line with theirs. A few days later, I received a text from Lauren asking if we could meet. I suggested a local park, neutral territory where we could talk without the pressure of being in either of our spaces. She agreed. As I prepared for this meeting, I consulted with the therapist I'd started seeing to help navigate these shifting family dynamics. Her perspective had been invaluable. Your sister's dismissive behavior likely comes from her own insecurities, she'd suggested during our last session. People who are truly confident don't need to diminish others. Consider the possibility that your success, even in a field she doesn't value, threatens her somehow. Armed with this insight and clear about my boundaries, I felt prepared to face Lauren with a strength I'd never brought to our relationship before. The balance of power had shifted, not because I'd seized control, but because I'd stopped giving mine away. The park was busy with weekend visitors, families pushing strollers, joggers on the paths, couples walking dogs. Lauren and I agreed to meet at the central fountain, a neutral location away from our usual spaces. I arrived 10 minutes early, choosing a bench with a clear view of the approach. Lauren appeared precisely on time, dressed more casually than usual in jeans and a light sweater. She spotted me and walked over, her posture still carrying that confidence she'd always projected. But her expression held something new, uncertainty. "Thanks for meeting me," she said, sitting beside me but maintaining some distance. "Of course," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. I'd prepared extensively for this conversation, writing down specific examples of past mistreatment and rehearsing my boundaries. The goal wasn't to attack Lauren, but to clearly communicate my experience and expectations moving forward. We sat in awkward silence for a moment before Lauren spoke again. "This is weird, isn't it? We've never had this kind of tension between us." "We have," I corrected gently. "We've just never acknowledged it before." She looked at me with genuine surprise. "What do you mean?" "Lauren, there's been tension between us for years. Every time Maxwell made a condescending comment about my career, and you said nothing. Every family gathering where my work was dismissed as a hobby while your achievements were celebrated. Every introduction where I was just my little brother rather than Courtney, who's an accomplished photographer." She started to interrupt, but I held up my hand. "Please, let me finish. I've spent weeks thinking about this, and I need you to hear me." Surprisingly, she nodded and remained silent. "What happened at your birthday dinner wasn't an isolated incident. It was just the most blatant example of how you and Maxwell have treated me for years. Being seated at the kids' table without even a place setting, being explicitly told I wasn't important enough to sit with the adults, it crystallized, something I've felt for a long time but couldn't articulate. You don't respect me or value my place in your life." Lauren's face flushed. "That's not fair. You're my brother. Of course I value you. Then why would you allow me to be treated that way? Why would you yourself say I wasn't important enough to have a proper seat at your birthday dinner?" She looked away, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her sweater. The seating was complicated. We had last-minute additions. "Lauren," I said firmly, "this isn't about logistics. You had options. You could have added another chair to the main table. You could have created a smaller adult table that included me. You could have pulled me aside and explained the situation respectfully. Instead, you allowed your husband to seat me with children, without even the basic courtesy of a place setting. And then you reinforced his message that I wasn't important." For a long moment, Lauren was silent. When she finally spoke, her voice had lost some of its defensive edge. "I didn't think about how it would make you feel." "That's exactly the problem," I said. "You didn't think about me at all. And that's been the pattern for years." I proceeded to list specific examples I'd prepared. The time she'd dismissed my first gallery showing because it conflicted with a dinner party at a colleague's home. The Christmas, where everyone received thoughtful gifts except me. The countless times she'd allowed Maxwell to make snide comments about my little picture-taking hobby without correction. Lauren listened without interrupting, her expression shifting from defensive to uncomfortable to, finally, something that looked like genuine reflection. "I didn't realize," she said when I finished. "I mean, I knew Maxwell could be harsh sometimes, but I thought it was just his sense of humor. And the other things, I guess I didn't see them as a pattern." "Well, they were," I said simply, "and they hurt. Not just because of the actions themselves, but because they came from my sister, someone who's supposed to have my back." Lauren was quiet for a long time, watching a family feed ducks at the pond's edge. "Our parents always made such a big deal about my academic achievements," she finally said. "Remember how Dad would put my report cards on the fridge, but never mentioned your art awards?" I nodded, surprised by this unexpected direction. "I think I internalized that," she continued. "Their metrics for success became mine: corporate job, prestigious title, financial stability. When you chose a different path, I didn't know how to value it because it didn't fit the framework I'd been taught." "That doesn't excuse treating me like I don't matter," I said, though my tone had softened slightly. "No, it doesn't," she agreed, and the simple acknowledgement felt like a breakthrough. "I'm not trying to excuse it. I'm trying to understand it myself. Why would I treat my own brother that way? Why would I let Maxwell speak to you like that?" She turned to face me directly. I think part of me was jealous." "Jealous?" I repeated, genuinely confused. "Of what?" "Of your freedom, your passion. You found something you love, and pursued it regardless of what anyone thought. I followed the path that was expected of me. Don't get me wrong, I like my job. I'm good at it. But did I choose it because I loved it, or because it was what our parents valued?" It was a surprisingly vulnerable admission from my typically controlled sister. I hadn't considered that my choices might have represented something threatening to her rather than something merely inferior. "That still doesn't explain Maxwell's behavior," I pointed out. Lauren sighed. "Maxwell comes from a family where status is everything. His father judges people entirely by their job title and income bracket. It's toxic, but it's the water he's been swimming in his whole life." She paused. "That's not an excuse either. I should have challenged him on how he treated you. I should have set boundaries." The irony of her using the same language I'd been using wasn't lost on me. "Yes, you should have." We talked for over 2 hours, covering years of accumulated hurt and misunderstanding. There were moments of tension, moments of surprising connection, and even a few minutes of the easy laughter we'd shared as children. For the first time in our adult relationship, we were speaking honestly rather than performing our assigned roles. Toward the end of our conversation, I remembered something. "I never told you about the gift I brought to your birthday." Lauren looked uncomfortable. I opened it the next day, the vintage Tiffany bracelet. "Courtney, how did you even find that?" "I mentioned it once, years ago." "I remembered," I said simply. "It took weeks to track down one like you described." Her eyes welled up unexpectedly. "That's what makes this all even worse. I treated you terribly, and you brought me something so thoughtful, something that showed you really listened and cared." "I did care," I said. "I still do. That's why this hurt so much." "I'm sorry," she said. And for the first time, it sounded like a genuine apology rather than a social nicety. "I'm truly sorry for how I treated you at my birthday and for all the times before that when I didn't value you or stand up for you." "Thank you," I said, finding that I genuinely appreciated her acknowledgement. "Where do we go from here?" Lauren thought for a moment. "I'd like to try to be better, to be the kind of sister who celebrates your success rather than diminishing it, who stands up to Maxwell when he's being condescending, who introduces you as my brother Courtney, the talented photographer, rather than just my little brother." "I'd like that too," I said, "but I need you to understand something. I won't go back to accepting disrespect to keep the peace. Not from you, not from Maxwell, not from anyone." She nodded slowly. "That seems fair. More than fair, actually." As we prepared to leave, Lauren asked hesitantly about the bracelet. "Do you want it back? I wouldn't blame you if you did." I considered the question. The bracelet had cost me significant money and effort, given to a person who, at the time, hadn't valued me enough to provide a proper seat at her birthday dinner. But returning it now felt petty, a step backward in the progress we'd just made. "Keep it," I said. Consider it a symbol of a new chapter in our relationship. 2 weeks later, Lauren invited me to a family dinner at her home. It would be the first time seeing Maxwell since our uncomfortable coffee meeting. I accepted with both hope and caution. Walking into their home felt different this time. Lauren greeted me warmly, introducing me to a couple I hadn't met before, as my brother Courtney, who's an incredible photographer. He just landed a 6-month assignment with National Geographic. The accuracy and pride in her introduction wasn't lost on me. Maxwell was more subdued than usual, offering a firm handshake and a drink without any snide comments about my career. During dinner, when conversation turned to my upcoming South America assignment, he actually asked thoughtful questions about the technical challenges of shooting in remote locations. The most revealing moment came when one of their friends, unaware of our recent history, made a dismissive comment about artists playing around while the rest of us work real jobs. Before I could respond, Lauren interjected. "Actually, professional photography is incredibly demanding," she said firmly. "Courtney runs his own business, manages client relationships, and produces creative work under pressure. It's not playing, it's skilled professional work that happens to be creative." The table fell silent for a moment before conversation shifted to another topic. Lauren caught my eye across the table and offered a small, meaningful smile. It wasn't a complete transformation. Maxwell still had moments of subtle condescension, and Lauren occasionally slipped into old patterns, but it was unmistakable progress. After dinner, Lauren pulled me aside. "I've been thinking about what you said about our parents creating this dynamic between us," she said. "I suggested we all try family therapy, just a few sessions to work through some of these patterns." I was genuinely surprised. "And they agreed?" "Mom did immediately. Dad took some convincing. But yes, would you be willing to join us?" The old Courtney would have agreed instantly, eager to please and maintain harmony. The new Courtney considered what was actually best for me. "I think it's a good idea," I said finally. "But I'd want to meet with the therapist first, one-on-one, to make sure they understand my perspective going in." "That's fair," Lauren nodded. "I can send you the information." As I left that evening, I felt a cautious optimism. Not that everything was fixed. Decades of dysfunctional patterns don't disappear overnight, but that real change was possible when boundaries were clearly established and respected. The holidays came, bringing the usual family gatherings, but with a noticeably different dynamic. My parents, perhaps influenced by their therapy sessions, made efforts to ask about my photography work with genuine interest. Lauren consistently redirected conversations when Maxwell began to slip into condescension, and I found myself able to engage authentically rather than performing the role of the overlooked younger sibling. During the New Year's celebration at my parents' house, an interesting moment occurred. Maxwell, several drinks in, made a reference to the kids' table incident, clearly attempting to frame it as a humorous misunderstanding. "Remember when Courtney got all worked up about sitting with the little ones?" He chuckled, looking around for support. The room grew uncomfortable. I met his gaze steadily. "I wasn't worked up about sitting with children, Maxwell. I was rightfully upset about being told I wasn't important enough to sit with adults, and not even being provided a place setting." Lauren stepped in immediately. "Maxwell, that's not funny. What happened that night was wrong, and we've acknowledged that." Maxwell looked surprised by his wife's correction, but didn't press the issue. The moment passed, but it represented something significant. The old pattern would have involved everyone laughing uncomfortably while I swallowed my hurt. The new pattern involved direct addressing of disrespect in the moment. It wasn't perfect, and there were still uncomfortable moments and old habits that emerged. But with each interaction, the new boundaries were reinforced, and healthier patterns began to take shape. The relationship with my sister was changing not overnight, but gradually and authentically, built on mutual respect rather than roles we'd been assigned by family dynamics long ago. 6 months after that fateful birthday dinner, I found myself on a video call with Lauren from a remote village in Peru. The international photography assignment had been everything I'd hoped for professionally, allowing me to capture breathtaking imagery while pushing my technical and creative boundaries. "The light there is incredible," I explained, showing her some of my recent shots on my laptop screen. "The way it filters through the mist in the mornings gives everything this ethereal quality." "These are stunning, Courtney," Lauren said, and the genuine appreciation in her voice was unmistakable. "Seriously, I've never seen anything like them. When is the magazine publishing the series?" "Next month's issue, with more being released online weekly after that. They're already talking about a book collection." "That's amazing. We'll have to get everyone together to celebrate when you're back." The easy conversation, her sincere interest in my work, it was such a stark contrast to where we'd been half a year earlier. The path to this point hadn't been easy or straightforward. There had been difficult conversations, moments of backsliding into old patterns, and the ongoing challenge of establishing new ways of relating to each other. But the fundamental shift was undeniable. The healing journey had begun with intense pain those first few weeks after the birthday dinner, when the hurt was raw and my confidence in standing up for myself was still fragile. During that time, I'd leaned heavily on Natalie's support and the validation of friends who helped me see that my reaction wasn't oversensitive, but entirely appropriate. Gradually, as I maintained my boundaries and refused to fall back into old patterns, a new kind of confidence emerged. Not the defensive kind that comes from protecting a wound, but the steady assurance of knowing my own worth regardless of others' treatment. This transformation extended beyond my relationship with Lauren. I began setting clearer boundaries with clients, no longer accepting projects that undervalued my work. I reconnected with old friends I'd lost touch with during years of prioritizing family that didn't prioritize me. I even had a frank conversation with my parents about their different treatment of Lauren and me throughout our childhood. That conversation with my parents had been particularly revealing. Initially defensive, they eventually acknowledged the disparity in their support and recognition. "We always thought Lauren needed the extra encouragement because she was so driven by external validation," my mother admitted. "You seemed so self-contained, pursuing what you loved regardless of praise." "I still needed your support," I told them. "Just because I didn't constantly seek your approval doesn't mean I didn't want it." It was a breakthrough moment. My father actually teared up, something I'd rarely seen in my life. "I'm sorry, son. I'm proud of what you've built, even if I haven't always shown it well." Maxwell remained the most resistant to change. Our interactions were still sometimes strained, though the outright condescension had largely disappeared. Lauren had taken my concerns seriously, having several difficult conversations with him about his behavior toward me. "He grew up in a family where worth was measured entirely by conventional success," she explained during one of our regular calls. "It's deeply ingrained in him, but he's trying, in his way." "I appreciate that," I replied honestly. "I don't expect us to be best friends, but mutual respect is non-negotiable." Lauren was wearing the vintage Tiffany bracelet during our video call from Peru. She noticed me looking at it and smiled. "I wear it all the time," she said. "It reminds me to listen better and value what matters." As our call was ending, she asked a question that caught me off guard. "Do you think you could ever forgive me? Truly forgive me for how I treated you for so many years?" I considered the question carefully. "I think forgiveness is a process, not a single moment," I finally replied. "There are days when the old hurt feels very present, and days when it feels like ancient history. But yes, I'm forgiving you continuously, imperfectly, but genuinely." She nodded, accepting the complexity of my answer rather than pushing for a simpler one. This too was growth. After hanging up, I sat on the small balcony of my temporary housing, watching the sun set over mountains that seemed to reach into eternity. The past 6 months had taught me perhaps the most profound lesson of my adult life, that self-respect isn't selfishness, that boundaries aren't walls but healthy definitions of where you end and others begin, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for yourself, and ultimately for others, is to refuse to accept treatment that diminishes your worth. The incident at Lauren's birthday dinner, painful as it was, had ultimately been a gift. It had crystallized years of subtle disrespect into one unmistakable moment that couldn't be explained away or minimized. It had pushed me to finally stand up for myself in a way I'd never done before. And in doing so, it had created the possibility for more authentic relationships, not just with Lauren, but with everyone in my life. I thought about the journey I'd been on since walking out of that restaurant 6 months earlier. The initial pain had been intense, the shock of realizing how little I was valued by people who should have valued me most. the grief of potentially losing family relationships, the discomfort of challenging patterns established over decades. But from that pain had come a kind of freedom I'd never known before. The freedom to define my own worth rather than accepting others' definitions. The freedom to connect authentically rather than from assigned roles. The freedom to say, "This isn't acceptable," rather than swallowing hurt to keep peace. Family relationships are complex, layered with history and expectation in ways that can make healthy boundaries particularly challenging. But I'd learned that being family doesn't grant license for disrespect. If anything, it should demand a higher standard of care and consideration. Looking back at where this journey began, standing beside a kid's table without even a place setting, hearing my sister say I wasn't important enough to sit with adults, I could now see it as the moment when something that had been breaking for years finally shattered completely, making space for something new and healthier to be built. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who didn't value you? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more real-life experiences. And if you know someone who might be struggling with similar family dynamics, share this video with them. Sometimes knowing we're not alone in these challenges can be the first step towards setting healthy boundaries. Thank you for listening to my story. And remember, your worth isn't determined by others' treatment of you, but by the value you place on yourself.